I am experimenting with utilizing Home Assistant, which is an open source piece of software that you can run on a server. I'm using one called Home Assistant Green, which is a simple plug and play option, but you can also use things like a Raspberry Pi to run it on. And it brings all of your smart devices together in one place. Being open source, it means that developers can, or yourself, anyone can contribute and create code that runs on it, integrating all sorts of different devices and creating automations and basically making it very modular, very customizable to your needs. It also reduces the need to log into different apps, different brands, proprietary applications, and it enables things to run locally, potentially, if you set it up that way. That's particularly useful for people who have concerns, data concerns, privacy concerns, but also people who would like these to be able to operate offline in case there are internet outages or because you live off grid. So, very powerful piece of software. I'm using it for a couple of things. One is utilizing a battery and a generator effectively all in one unit. EcoFlow is the company and Delta Pro is the product. It sort of does various things, but mostly what I'm using it for is with another product that they have called the Power Stream, which allows me to backfeed up to 800 watts of energy back into my house, which will cover things, and I can set that rate, the amount. So for example, here on this graph, it's showing that at midday, I was backfeeding 159 watts into my house, which was covering some of the base load of the house. And I can charge it back up at night when the rates are lower, because I'm with Octopus Energy, and I've yet to get this set up properly, but you can bring in the Octopus Agile rates, which change on a half-hourly basis, and potentially create automations to get other devices to work with that. So that's one thing I'm using it for, but I'm also using it with some Switchbot thermohygrometers. So they measure the temperature and the relative humidity and display that on sensors throughout my house. I have, I think, 5 sensors upstairs, and then 3 downstairs, 1 in the loft, 1 outside at the back of the house. So quite a few all over. And the reason I have this is because I've got extremely bad problems with damp in the house, and we've been trying to renovate the house for a long time, trying to fix the very extensive damp issues. So I've been geeking out about moisture and damp for years and become a bit of a building pathologist, if you like, just through studying, reading, and experience. And what I wanted to be able to do was to convert the relative humidity into the absolute humidity. Both are interesting and relevant measurements. Relative humidity is sort of an interesting one because it changes based on the temperature of the air. So when the air is warmer, it can carry more water. I like to think of it as though each temperature of air has a certain size of bucket of water that it can carry, but in vapor form. So when that bucket is full, when the air is completely saturated with water, it is at 100% relative humidity. And anything beyond that will drop out into liquid form again. So that's when we see condensation. And you can think of that in terms of in a room, as in a big lump of air within a room, but you can get very granular with it too. So it may be that, in the corner, down low, behind your sofa, there will be a much smaller section of air which is cold and has a much lower capacity for carrying water, which is why at that point the moisture may condense specifically there. And the moisture in vapor form can move around the house. So think of it like weather systems. And there are differences in pressure effectively in the same way that weather systems might work. Not that I'm an expert in any way, shape, or form on that. But it's sort of an interesting metaphor and way to look at it, to try and build a picture of what's happening. Now, the absolute humidity comes in because it helps you think about the actual amount of water there is, not in relation to temperature, because that then enables you to compare different areas more easily and what's happening where. Because, for example, when the temperature is really cold outside, it might say that there's 80% humidity, 85%, 90%. You might think it's very damp, but actually, in absolute humidity terms, because it's so cold outside, the air is actually very dry. So then the absolute humidity in grams per meters cubed would be low. So if you were to bring that dry, cold air inside and heat it up, switch that effectively for the warm, damp air inside the house, that will help dry out your house. So what I was interested in was seeing things like the bathroom. When moisture is generated in there, we can see these big spikes as high as 17 grams per meters cubed, which is really high. And that's with a dehumidifier running in there, because currently there is no extraction, which would be a better solution, but it is a temporary setup. There will be another bathroom at the front of the house, which is what this red one here is, which is currently not in use. So the front bedroom and the bathroom are currently just building sites. The middle bedroom is occupied and has a radiator in, as does the bathroom. So what we can see is that when there are these big spikes in the bathroom, when the shower is used, it then will move to other areas. So as a sort of control, if you like, we've got the sensors which are in the loft, this red line here, and the outside at the back of the house, which is the north-facing side of the house. And they just give us a sense of kind of what's happening locally in the climate, I suppose. So you can show, give a bit of a baseline to compare to. And they will always tend to be much lower absolute humidity than inside the house, because I have a very damp house. And so they will they won't be affected by what happens when there is a shower, really. However, elsewhere in the house will be affected. So this is the 3 rooms downstairs: downstairs front, downstairs middle, downstairs back, just DF, DM, DB for short. So we've got a couple of flat spots, which is where the sensors have lost connection with the hub. We'll ignore those. But we can see that when there is this big spike here, there are also corresponding spikes in the 3 rooms downstairs. So we can see that moisture is moving from the bathroom to there. Now, this is despite us closing the bathroom doors. We have draft strips on the bathroom door as well. And operating a dehumidifier in there, which is why the spike goes back down quite quickly afterwards. If we didn't have a dehumidifier running, this would sort of continue and take much longer to drop again. And then you can see the same really upstairs, particularly on the landing. That spike's quite high. To a lesser degree, maybe the front bedroom. The middle bedroom is adjacent to the bathroom at the back, and there may be some gaps through the wall. It's not completely impermeable, that wall. It's got lime plaster, and there's also some gaps in it, so there's probably some moisture that can easily get through from the bathroom to the middle bedroom, which is the green line. So you can see what's interesting to note actually is that although there is a spike in the middle bedroom on this green line, there was also a big dip before. And I think what that is about is that the boiler's coming on prior to the shower being used, because the boiler is kind of broken and the hot water only works if the heating's on. So I think what happens is the heating comes on, that causes the absolute humidity to drop. Now, if it was relative humidity, it would definitely drop anyway, because the temperature of the air goes up, so it would look as though the humidity had dropped, even if the air was the same wetness, because the percentage number would drop because the temperature had increased. However, what we are looking at here is actually the absolute humidity, and that is dropping. And I think that might be linked to effectively like pressure from the heat being on. So the moisture is actually kind of being driven out of that room into other areas of the house at that point, I think. Question mark. Anyway, that's sort of something that these graphs allow you to look at and see what's happening, where the moisture is moving from and to. It's really difficult to be very accurate and really see exactly what's happening, but you can really get a picture which helps understand what's going on. Yeah, and you can also utilize this, alongside running extractor fans, dehumidifiers, which, are sort of a bit of a band-aid, to be honest. You don't really want to be running your dehumidifiers all the time because they're very expensive and not nearly as efficient as, for example, cross ventilation or decent extraction. Because, as you can see, the outside absolute humidity is almost always so much less. And what you want to be doing is getting this moist air and switching it for that dry air that's outside. However, in a house like mine, where there are substantial issues with not just user-generated moisture from things like showering and cooking, but there is also moisture in the fabric of the building that, despite all our attempts to mitigate in terms of checking all of the plumbing for leaks, all of the sewage, we've replaced all of the sewage, all of the guttering, replacing, removing a lot of the cement render from the outside of the building, allowing it to dry out for years. Despite all of that, there are issues to do with the construction of the building. It's a Victorian terrace, but whilst rising damp is massively, massively overdiagnosed, there is actually moisture rising up the walls in my house, probably to do with, could well be leaks from the water mains in the road, and issues to do with sort of settling of the house and how the drain pipes are, things that are sort of outside my control because they are, who knows, well, no one knows whose responsibility it is. Council, water boards, that neither of them want to take responsibility. So it's a bit of a difficult one really to rectify fully. However, This is helping me see exactly what's going on with the house and whether measures that I take are actually helping. And with a this is only over 3 days, but with a longer picture, so over a month or a year, you can then see if certain measures you've taken have actually dropped the relative humidity over time, absolute humidity. So yeah, hopefully that's useful. And you can obviously show various other things. I have just some little visualization showing temperature and dew point, so I can sort of kind of see at a glance. This is probably not the best visualization, but if I look, for example, where is the highest dew point in the house? Here we go, downstairs front, 12.18 degrees C. I actually don't trust that because it's really level. Let's go with a different one. 11.69. So that level probably means that it's not picking up data at the moment. So 11.69 degrees C. And I can look and see, well, you know, the outside temperature for the loft and outside the back of the house, 9.2 and 8.1 degrees C, which means that the walls will have a sort of a temperature gradient, if you like, from the inside to the outside, going from whatever it is inside. So say downstairs back, here we go, this room, 13.7 internally to 8.1 externally. So somewhere in the middle of that wall is the moisture is going to drop out from downstairs middle. It's going to drop out at 11.69 where that sits in the wall. So that's a large part of the problem that's happening with my house. It's not just, there is moisture occurring from moisture rising from the ground as well. But there is also a lot of like recondensing of that moisture. So it tries to evaporate into the air, and then it's cooling in other parts of the house and turning back into liquid form inside the walls. So yeah, this is really helpful to start seeing exactly what's happening with your house if you have the inclination, because I realize this sort of geekery isn't for everyone. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. Any questions, please do post them below.